Anyway,
Mr.
so
President, what do you have to say about what's happening in Russia and Ukraine? Have you spoken with anyone in the Ukrainian government?
I've spoken with my staff on a regular basis, probably every 4 or 5 hours for the last 6 or 8 days, and it's creating a real dilemma for Putin, and we've been in direct contact, constant contact with the Ukrainians. That's all I'm going to say about it while it's active. Okay?
Do you think you can still get to a ceasefire deal, or is that starting to be a distant possibility?
It's getting hard. We'll see what Iran does, and we'll see what happens if there's any attack. But I'm not giving up.
Are those two things tied together?
That's President Biden just moments ago on the tarmac in New Orleans talking about Ukrainians getting into Russian territory. Meantime, President Zelensky says in the last 24 hours, Ukrainian forces have seized another 15 square miles of Russian land in the Kursk region. He also says Ukrainian forces now control 74 Russian communities. That brings the total of the week-long surprise incursion to nearly 400 square miles. And to put that into perspective, that's as much ground as Russia has gained in Ukraine over the last year. Now Russian officials are ordering new evacuations. We know tens of thousands have already fled as Ukraine forces continue to push forward. CNN Chief International Security Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh is following the latest from London for us. And Nick, all of this, of course, a massive embarrassment for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, look, make no mistake about this. We're a week into something which Ukraine didn't even accept it was doing for 48 hours, hinting at it only in the middle of last week, around about the time, too, in which Vladimir Putin heard from his top brass that they'd essentially halted the advance. And now, today, it continues with the number of settlements under their control leaping from local Russian officials saying 28 yesterday to now Vladimir Zelensky saying 74. Now, bear in mind, this is a large swathe of relatively sparsely populated border area that presumably Russia thought Ukraine would never try and take, yet they seem to have marched in relatively unimpeded. Yes, there's video of Ukrainian soldiers lost in the fighting here and Russians taken prisoner too. But ultimately we have 121,000 from yesterday Russians being evacuated. The numbers are frankly staggering, as is the speed in which Ukraine has moved and the efficiency too. And there have been a number of videos we've seen that suggest Western supplied armour has indeed been used as part of this. Now, I couldn't quite hear everything President Biden was saying, but it was clear he's being kept abreast of the situation, and rightly so. This is an utterly staggering moment in the war. And Jessica, we have to try and work out really what is Ukraine's end game here. They've already achieved probably their first goal, which is to embarrass Moscow, to make it clear that they're potentially good at those slow, grinding fights over one small town in the winter, losing thousands of men over tiny amounts of territory. But when it comes to responding to large, sweeping mobilizations of Ukrainian troops across large areas of undefended territory, they've proven useless. They've not sent strong enough forces, and the ultimate question, I think, about this is, does Ukraine sustain this long enough to force Vladimir Putin to stem the embarrassment by sending his better troops from parts of the front line where they're fighting in occupied Ukraine? Or is he willing to just allow this remarkable Ukrainian run across farmlands, border areas that he keeps being told is about to be stopped, for that to continue for yet more days? It's not a turning point in the war, I would say, but certainly a moment where Ukraine's strength, mobility and Western supplies are now seeing full use, and one that may give Ukraine an upper hand if indeed we end up seeing something approaching talks in the months ahead. Bizarrely, during this Ukrainian lightning dash across Russian territory, both sides keep referring to peace talks, distant as they seem now, but I think that's what's potentially in the distance here, maybe guiding Ukraine's moves, along with the possibility that they're just very eager to get some positive military headlines after a bad year of losing ground.
Yeah, as you note, a key moment that certainly could have implications on the future. All right, Nick Payton-Walsh, thank you so much for that reporting. Boris?
Let's get some analysis now on this Ukrainian offensive. With us, retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. Colonel Leighton, always great to have you on. First, explain where this is in Russia. Put it on the map for us.
Absolutely, Boris. Well, one of the key things here, in fact, let's go to the big map first just to give everybody a bit of an idea. This area right here is what we're talking about. This is where the Ukrainians have made their big incursion. And when you go up here, this is a detailed look at this same area, the town of Sudzha. is the first area that the Ukrainians captured, and they're moving basically in this general direction toward things like the capital of the Kursk Oblast, to this region right here, as well as a nuclear power plant, which just happens to be right there as well. So the Ukrainians could potentially go in that direction if they wanted to extend themselves and if they have the capability to do that.
Is the nuclear power plant the target? Why exactly are they headed in this direction?
So we don't know if the nuclear power plant is really the target, but there's several other things that are going on here. First of all, this is the Kursk nuclear power plant. It's right up here where the symbol is. And then we have this pipeline. This pipeline is the gas pipeline. About 50% of Russia's gas exports go through this pipeline to Europe, specifically to countries like Hungary and Slovakia. And that's why that is one of the reasons that the Ukrainians have captured things like this gas meter plant right here. This is actually part of the pipeline. This is what it looked like back in July of 22. This is what it looks like now. Clearly we have a bit of damage associated with this, and that is perhaps one of the targets. They can cut off supplies. If they cut this off right here, right now Ukraine gets money from this gas pipeline, but they could also tell the Russians, okay, enough is enough and we can cut this.
And Colonel, if we could go back to the broader map, I am curious about what this means for the war altogether, because as Nick Payton Walsh noted, over the last year, at best you could say it's been a stalemate. Russia has made some gains. So what does this mean for Ukraine going into Russian territory?
So this is really big because nobody has invaded Russian space, Russian territory since the Second World War. So the Ukrainians have done something that really nobody has done, even though this is a very small area right here, only about 1,000 square kilometers, a little less than 400 square miles. It is still a significant thing. Now, you mentioned the rest of the war. So let's focus on the Donbas region, because the Donbas region, we remember the town of Bakhmut, which was fought over for a really long time, and all the towns that you see listed right here. Well, one of the problems that the Ukrainians have is basically this line of defense right here is the one that the Russians are contesting right now, and they are advancing along this area incrementally, but they are advancing, and these advances really mean that there's a lot of pressure on the Ukrainians. If the Russians move forward, they would take all of the Donbas region, which is one of Vladimir Putin's goals.
And for the Ukrainians, in terms of their goals for this incursion into Russia, could this be seen as a bargaining chip moving into potential peace talks?
That's the one thing that Putin got right, potentially, because when you talk about some of the things that have happened here in this particular area, you see that the Russians really control all of these areas right here. All of this is about 18% of Ukraine's territory, internationally recognized territory. The Ukrainians obviously want to get most of this back, if not all of it. And if they get this back, then they will have achieved their major goals. But of course, they would have to do a lot more than just invade this little part of this particular territory of Russia.
Sure, those are probably their long-term goals, but also what does it mean for the psychology of Russians to have Vladimir Putin embarrassed this way, to have Ukrainian troops on his land, on his territory?
Yeah, that means a lot, because it's coupled, even though the Russians are advancing a little bit incrementally in this particular area, we have to keep in mind that the Ukrainians have been pretty effective. They sunk this submarine while it was being repaired. They also have taken out the S-400 systems in several locations. This is a major surface-to-air missile system, in other words, an air defense system that the Russians have that's very effective, but when you take it out, that gives the opportunity for F-16s to go flying, uncontested, potentially uncontested airspace, or at least less contested airspace. And for all of these areas right here, this would be a major goal for Ukraine. And of course, to capture this area right here, those would be the kinds of things that they would absolutely love to have. And if they can get that far, or at least part of this, then they will have the capability to at least sit down at the table with the Russians. Whether or not they go that way, and whether or not they're effective enough to do this, or whether or not they're going to be stopped, of course, are other questions.
Colonel Cedric Leighton, appreciate the insight. Thanks so much for being with us.
You bet, Boris.